Welcome, everybody. Thank you for this great turnout. I want to especially greet our speakers, our distinguished guests, our community representatives, and our concerned citizens. Welcome to our Candlelight Vigil. This is being sponsored through the League of Women Voters in partnership with Public Citizen. There are vigils being held across the country, and we're very proud to have this one here in our hometown of Ames, Iowa. My name is Linda Sarah Hagedorn. I am the president of the local League of Women Voters of Ames and Story County. I also want to mention that we do have applications for membership to the League, and we're not just for women only. So please, if you're interested, please be sure and talk to me or any one of our other members. Why are we here? Just a little brief history. 1965, through the Johnson administration, the Voters' Right Act was passed. And it was a momentous piece of legislation that opened up voting rights for people of all colors, people of all walks of life. It was certainly an important piece of legislation that opened up the 15th Amendment for everyone. But then in 2013, something happened. There was a Supreme Court ruling, Shelby County versus Holder, that more or less gutted the rights of the Voting Rights Act. And what has happened since then is we have seen hundreds of polling places closed. Now, in all honesty, most of the severe backlash of the 2013 legislation was felt more strongly within the southern states, in Texas, in North Carolina, and Arizona. But we in Iowa can't be complacent, because we have our issues here as well. And so we want to reinstate the Voters' Rights Act. I think it only right that we have a moment of silence to recognize the victims of the recent gun violence that our country has seen recently. What a pivotal point in our country's history that we are at today, when things like the terrible atrocities that have happened recently can even occur. Today, our speakers we will start out with Linda Merkin, who is chair of the Board of Supervisors of Story County. She will be followed by Taylor Blair, who is an ISU student and former president of the ISU College Democrats. He will be followed by Natalie Robinson, who's a chair for the Iowa Poor People's Campaign. She will be followed by Ross Wilburn, who I think I can say represents the House of Representatives of District 46. And summing up our speakers will be Senator Herman Kornbach, our Iowa State Senator of District 23. After the speakers, we will pass out candles. We will have our 5-minute vigil, and then I'll come back with some final comments, and then I'll send everyone on their way. But however, we want to make sure that this is just the beginning, that we do all want to stand strong for restoring voter rights in Iowa and elsewhere. Okay, Linda Merkin.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you to the League for putting on this vigil tonight. I'm speaking tonight not as a county supervisor, but as a League member and somebody who's worked on voting issues for quite some time now. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Those who have worked in the fight for voting rights know that the arc does not bend on its own. It took 72 years from the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention before women won the right to vote. And even though former slaves were given the right to vote after Civil War, in the 1890s, Jim Crow laws in the South basically took that vote away and made it impossible for them to vote, put insurmountable odds in front of them. 18 to 20-year-olds. And by the way, it was the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that really got rid of all those Jim Crow laws and was basically when blacks in this country actually had the right to vote. Now, then, 18 to 20-year-olds, they did not get constitutional right to vote until 1971, despite the fact that during World War II, the draft age was lowered to 18. So it took time there. And as you know then, what has happened is, as Linda said, in 2013, Shelby v. Holder basically took away a lot of the guarantees of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Since then, we've had 20 states that have enacted voter ID laws, that have enacted other laws that have made it much more hard for people to vote. And they've reduced polling places, shortened voting hours, and also reduced early voting. Then just 2 months ago, we had the court rule that it doesn't have the authority to prevent partisan gerrymandering. And that gerrymandering is just another way we take away people's votes, people's right to vote. There are links, as I think you all realize, between the assault on voting rights and the increased violence in this country. When state legislators enact laws that make it difficult for people of color, elderly, disabled, or students to vote, the message is sent: those people do not matter. When our president makes inflammatory statements about immigrants, as well as U.S. citizens of non-Anglo ancestry, he reinforces that message. And then he blames race-based violence on mental illness. When he does that, he perpetrates another damaging and discriminatory myth, as well as misplacing the blame. Make no bones about it. The fight for voting rights is a fight for lives. It always has been, and it always will be. Today's challenge, as Linda said, is to restore the Voting Rights Act through the passage of H.R. 4, which is the Voting Rights Advancement Act. It'll restore the protections overturned by the Supreme Court. It will require transparency, notification of voter changes, and informing voters about all their voting options. We need these safeguards more than ever. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for your commitment to bending the arc of the universe toward justice.
Hi everybody, my name is Taylor Blair. I'm a student at Iowa State. A lot of you have really amazing signs that are really punching to the point, but this is a really important sign. This is the flow chart of all the decisions and all the barriers in the way of people who are just trying to vote. It's complicated, and every year that I've been in Iowa State, it's gotten more complicated. So ever since I came to Iowa State, since my first week on campus, I was volunteering with campaigns, I was registering voters, and every year that I've been a part of the process, I've gotten to have less and less conversations about the issues, about the election, about the parties, and about the candidates, and more conversations just about how to access the right to vote, how to register, what they need to bring to the election day. And I think that really weakens our democracy. The more conversations we can have about the issues and about candidates and about the parties and what's on the line for the elections, the stronger we become as a country, the more we can heal the divides that we see, the divisiveness, the partisanship. So that's why I'm here today. I really hope everyone takes the time to contact their elected officials to support H.R. 4 and make sure that we get back to talking about what's important, the issues, the candidates, solutions to problems. So I am actually a plaintiff on a lawsuit right now that's challenging the voter ID law here in Iowa, H.F. 516, that passed in 2017. It's been in soft rollout and it's finally in full rollout effect. It's fully in effect now. And I truly am scared about what's going to happen in 2020 if this lawsuit does not succeed. So I'm really optimistic. I hope we succeed. It'll get rid of the voter ID requirement. It's already in effect in certain ways that have made it much easier to vote in this past election. But we really cannot rely on the courts, right? This Shelby ruling back a couple years ago has proven it. Other rulings recently have proven it that we cannot rely on the courts. They're a fail-safe, but we really have to take proactive action. So going forward in 2020, If a student doesn't have the right ID on election day, you will have to vote provisionally. Which means that if I don't have my ID on election day, I'll have to drive all the way to Nevada within a certain amount of time during polling, during office hours, in order to fix my provisional ballot. If only 3 or 5 out of every 100 student voters have this problem, I think that's probably a low estimate. It could be hundreds or thousands of voters who are disenfranchised. It's not just happening in the South, it's happening right here in Iowa. One of the most important things that got out of being a part of this lawsuit, which is still ongoing, is the data that it uncovered. In 2018, 1 in 6 Black or Hispanic voters did not have the proper ID, while only 1 in 13 white voters, right? Almost twice as many. 1 in 8 of the youngest cohort, that's my friends at Iowa State, 1 in 6 of the oldest cohort did not have the proper ID, and only 1 in 14 of the group in between didn't have the right ID. This law targets young people, old people, people of color. What's not captured in this data is how it affects people with disabilities. It's really important to know who's most affected so that we can work hard to make sure that we're reaching out to those communities going forward in 2020, because we really have to work as if it's going to be in effect, because there's a good chance it will be. So, what can we do here at Iowa State? That's my community, that's what I'm really excited about working on. I have 3 friends here, they have these little pieces of paper. Iowa State has the ability to add expiration dates to our ISU cards. By just adding one simple line, every single ISU student will be able to use their ISU card to vote. They can do that, they have refused to do it. We have been pushing for years to have them do this. They say it's too expensive, but I think it is worth every dollar to ensure everyone at Iowa State can vote. So there's 3 people on this piece of paper that you can call and email, along with your representatives, about HR 4. You can contact Wendy Winterstein, the president at ISU, Joan Piscatello, who's the treasurer at Iowa State, she's in charge of ISU cards, and Martina Harmon, who's the director of student affairs. All 3 of those people have direct ability to make sure thousands of students are not disenfranchised, and they have refused to do so. So, contact your elected officials, contact people at ISU, make sure you register to vote, make sure you vote early, make sure you vote often, make sure you know your rights, and let's keep working. Thank you.
I'm Natalie Robinson with the Iowa Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I'm one of the tri-chairs of our state, and I'm here with my husband, also part of the campaign. And we are here tonight because we are committed to this democracy. Everyone, no matter their race, creed, religion, gender identity, sexual orientation, economic status, political party, incarceration record, the list goes on and on. All of us deserve a right to go to the ballot box. The PPC is a moral fusion movement joining justice organizations across the country to challenge the interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty and inequality, militarism and the war economy, ecological devastation, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. So we attack all 5 of these interlocking injustices, which is why we're really honored to be here with the League of Women Voters. We are here in solidarity with you tonight because we believe that by shifting the narrative and building power among poor and low-income people, clergy, advocates, we will change the way that our political system operates. The voices and experiences of those most impacted by racist and otherwise discriminatory voter suppression should be the ones shaping our local, state, and federal policy. By gutting the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County versus Holder, our country has basically gutted the 14th Amendment of our Constitution, a document that is the moral grounding of our country. Section 1 of the 14th Amendment states, "No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." It is because of the rights that we've been given that we must stand up and demand that all people have the right to the vote. As the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, we demand the immediate and full restoration and expansion of the Voting Rights Act. an end to racist gerrymandering and redistricting, early registration of 17-year-olds to vote, automatic voting registration at the age of 18, early voting in every state, same-day registration, the enactment of Election Day as a national holiday, and a verifiable paper record. We demand the right to vote for current and formerly incarcerated people. We demand adequate funding for polling places to accommodate the full participation of the electorate. We demand an end to placing persons on the federal bench who have a record of standing against voting rights. We demand statehood, voting rights, and representation for the more than 690,000 people in Washington, D.C. We demand the reversal of state laws preempting local government from passing minimum wage increases and the removal of the emergency financial management positions like we saw in Flint, Michigan, that are unaccountable to the democratic process. We demand a clear and just immigration system that strengthens our democracy through the broad participation of everyone in this country. This includes providing a timely citizenship process that guarantees the right to vote. It also requires protecting immigrants' ability to organize for their rights in the workplace and in their communities without fear of retribution, detention, or deportation. And we demand the First Nations, Native Americans, and Alaskan Native people retain their tribal recognition as nations, not races, to make substantive claims to their sovereignty. Thank you all for your presence here tonight and your fight for our democracy. Feel free to connect with the Poor People's Campaign. We've got a website, we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter. Connect with us. We'd love to have you on board. And thank you to all the co-sponsors of this vigil. Forward together, not one step back.
Hello, Story County. Hello, Story County. There we go. My name is Ross Wilburn. My preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm honored to be here with a group of eloquent speakers, followed by Senator Herman Kornbach, to talk about the Voting Rights Act. We were asked to share a story, and my story actually is really pretty quick, because without the 15th Amendment, which made it illegal to stop people from voting based on race, color, and former servitude, and the Civil Rights Act, I simply would not be standing here within 1 hour of being the next representative in the Iowa House for Ames. But it's not just about now, and history shows that our rights can change. They can be taken away from you. My father was born in 1932 in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. I was born in 1964, and I remember during those trips down to Pine Bluff for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, realizing and feeling as a 5 to 7-year-old the difference in community, the redlining that was going on. Even as a 5 to 7-year-old, I knew there were parts of Pine Bluff that I could not be. And this is within my lifetime, okay? And so it took the Civil Rights Act, it took the original Voting Rights Act to make sure that we were not discriminating, and not just based on color, and not just based on race. There are other areas, that we need to make sure that people's rights are not being taken away from them. People get disenfranchised, even up to the point where actions are taken at the local level. Now, as a former local elected official, I believe in local control. However, our state and federal laws, it's important that they set a floor that states shall not go below. We do not want states discriminating, period. We don't want that happen. And taking away your right to vote is a clear way to do that. There are a lot of subtle, tricky ways that those who are looking to discriminate can go about doing that. Logistics they can put in the way. Things like setting an election in August when students and faculty and people are on vacation, right? I have a lot of support from many of you present, from the other legislators that have been going around, county supervisors helping to go door to door to make people aware. And even just today being out, I had people, oh yeah, I'll be for you. I'll be there in September. It's like, no, September's a different special election. So it's August 6th, so Tuesday, yeah, today. And so it's those subtle steps that can erode the right to vote. And this goes into other areas too. We take for granted the 8-hour workday and the fact that we've got health care. You know, unions collectively bargained through that and fought for that through the years. And so our job moving forward, yes, we want to make sure that the voting rights, the H.R. 4 is put into place and signed into law. But there are other arenas, there are other areas. We've got to have people in place that are going to vote for this. And so it doesn't stop with the election tonight. We've got someone whose RV just came by soon that made an announcement. There he is back there. JD, good to see you. He's going to be taking on Steve King again. I hope I didn't take any thunder away, but it was in the papers already. But it's that type of action that we need to continue to work, and we have to work tirelessly. And yeah, you know, my tendonitis flared up on my ankles from knocking on doors, but until we move through those little temporary discomforts, we won't have the momentum present to make sure that we are safe and secure and enjoying the freedoms that we all have. That's really the story I wanted to share. I had the fortunate opportunity to have served as the first African American mayor of the city of Iowa City. I now will be the 5th person of color in the Iowa House of Representatives, and it wasn't just about me. It was because of all of you going out to vote. And if you haven't voted, you still have till 9 o'clock to get there. Thanks, and thanks everybody.
And Ross, you forgot to tell them where your victory party is going to be.
Mothers!
On West Street over on Campus Town, and I think J.D. Schulten is going to be there, right? You wouldn't miss a good victory party. We're going to have one for you, too, sometime soon. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Herman Quernbach. I'm State Senator from Ames. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you tonight. Just after those famous words in the Declaration of Independence about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the next clause says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Those are the words that bring us here tonight. For in a democracy, it is the consent of the governed that gives the government the moral authority to govern. Not the power, but the moral authority, or what is often called the legitimacy. Consent of the governed is how legitimacy is conveyed, and voting is how consent is given. Without the full and free participation of the citizenry in voting, democratic government loses its legitimacy. So when voting rights are restricted, the whole basis of our system is put at risk. Now, the framers of our Constitution were a little wary of ordinary citizens voting. They feared that democracy might degenerate into mob rule. And frankly, I think about that every time I watch a Trump rally. So the framers limited who could vote and what those voters could do. They knew what they were doing wasn't perfect, and that it needed to be expanded later on in order to, as they said, form a more perfect union. Indeed, it is that expansion that is a central theme of our democratic history. After the first 10 amendments, after the Bill of Rights, we have amended the Constitution 17 times. 5 of those times have been to expand voting rights to freed slaves, to women, to residents of the District of Columbia, to youth over 18, and to those unable to pay a poll tax. And then there's the 17th Amendment, which allows ordinary citizens to directly elect their United States senators. I think we need one more amendment to allow ordinary citizens to directly elect the President of the United States and abolish the Electoral College. Now, the history of voting rights, as other speakers have alluded, has not been an uninterrupted march forward. After the 15th Amendment extended voting rights to freed slaves, the powers in the former Confederate states largely took that right away through the Jim Crow system of poll taxes and literacy tests. That is, when they weren't using the brute force of the Ku Klux Klan. It took another century before significant progress could once again be made against race discrimination in voting, and that was the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That legislation generally prohibited practices that discriminate against racial and language minorities. It also contained special provisions that required jurisdictions with notably poor records of discrimination, I'm being kind there, required those districts to seek pre-clearance from the federal government before making changes in voting procedures. Sad to say, however, that critical pre-clearance provision was gutted by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Shelby County case that others have mentioned. And increasingly since that time, measures have been undertaken, especially at the state level, to restrict voting. One of the widely imposed restrictions is voter ID. And Taylor gave us one local example of how that needs to be fixed with regard to student IDs and having the right information on those IDs. Despite little to no evidence of voter fraud in Iowa or elsewhere, Iowa and other states have begun to require voters to provide such state-issued identification before their ballots could be counted. I'd like to share a personal experience with this. My mother died 6 years ago. She was 97 years old. Do the math. She was born in 1916. That's 4 years before the 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote. At the beginning of her life, she did not have any expectation of being able to vote. And at the end of her life, Scott Walker was trying to take that right away. She spent the last 10 years of her life in a nursing home. She didn't need an ID. She didn't have to cash a check. She wasn't going to fly. She wasn't going to drive. But she still should have been able to vote. At the beginning of her life, she didn't have that right. And at the end, some people were trying to take it away again. Other efforts to take away the right to vote include the purging of voter registration. I should mention, my mother was a League member. I'm following in some good footsteps. Purging of voter registration lists, of course, does have to take place from time to time to remove the names of people who have died or who have moved away. But in recent years, there have been numerous instances where various states have purged their voter files very aggressively, certainly eliminating the names of valid voters. Ominously, the Brennan Center for Justice has found that voter purges significantly increased in some states after the Shelby decision removed the pre-clearance requirements that previously applied to those states. As it says on the Brennan Center's website, Georgia purged twice as many voters, 1.5 million voters. They purged twice as many voters between 2012 and 2016, in other words, after Shelby, than in the 4 years before. Stacey Abrams, you may remember, the African-American woman, lost last fall the Georgia governor's race by about 55,000 votes. 1.5 million had been purged from the rolls. She was beaten by Brian Kemp, the secretary who, you guessed it, oversaw that voter purge. But we don't have to look to Wisconsin or to Georgia to understand voter suppression. 2 blocks west of here, you get into what in about half an hour is going to be Ross's district, House District 46. Special election to fill a vacancy. The Governor Reynolds, could have chosen to schedule that special election after school started, after students were back in town. The district, after all, does include most of Central Campus, all of the Central Campus dorms, not the towers, but a lot of the student housing, off-campus housing to the west as well. She could have given those students the right to vote for their representative. She instead chose to hold the election today. Now, Governor Reynolds has played the same trick on Cedar Falls last March, a special election for a state Senate seat. She scheduled during spring break week for UNI when the students were out of town. Now, fortunately, I think I can say it backfired in both cases. Up in Cedar Falls, a lot of those students voted absentee before they went off for spring break, and the Democratic candidate won by a substantial margin in a district that had previously been a swing district. And here, well, the schedule was so short, the time frame was so short, our Republican friends couldn't even find a candidate. But you know, we can't count on luck or bad political judgment. We have to redouble our efforts to make sure that voting rights are assured for all. There are many dimensions to this: voter registration, timelines for absentee ballots, signature requirements for absentee ballots, a whole long list of things. One of the things that we have to do in this state is to restore voting rights to people who have completed their prison sentences. And thanks to the governor for supporting a constitutional amendment. But you know, she doesn't have to wait. She can, with a stroke of a pen, restore those rights, just as Governor Vilsack did and Governor Culver as well. So let's get at it. Let's keep up the pressure. Let's make sure that the basis of democracy, the legitimacy of our form of government, is retained. Thanks for all of you being here tonight.
Okay, we can light those candles. Dinner's being held across. Have enough candles for everybody. We didn't plan for as many, but next time we'll know. We'll have our vigil for just a few minutes.
Yes.
In
Yes, you
honor
came
of
to
the
our
passage of the voters' rights.
yeah. Good to see you.
We want to make it clear that restoring the VRA is central to any effort to build a representative democracy in which people of color can be full participating members. Keep our eyes open and we want to be sharp and ready. Thank you today for shedding a light on democracy and for voting rights across our state and across our nation. Thank you very much.
What? It's not.
Should we